My dear friends, no doubt many of you will spend a few hours watching television this evening and reliving again the magic of the first day of the Holy Father's visit to our country. And those of us who made our way in the early hours of the morning to Phoenix Park in that first week of October, have wonderful memories not only of our pilgrimage, that is travelling the roads together, not only of greeting the Holy Father, but especially of the joy and friendliness of the sharing of our tea, our sandwiches, our binoculars, our chairs, something of a kind of foretaste, I like to think, of heaven, of the great multitude of people who will be filled with the very joy of God and share all they have with one another. And surely this is what it means to be a Christian, to be a brother or a sister to everyone, to share what I have with those in need, to give and not to hoard. This is what we remember every time we gather here like this morning to celebrate the Eucharist. We need only to look at the crucifix on the wall of the chapel, or perhaps beside your bed, or there on your rosary beads. We see the image of a man on a cross, a man who gave everything away in life for love of others, even his very life itself. The image of a man in his death agony, and yet it is here, in this weakness and this utter self-giving, that the fullness of life is to be found. It is surely a reminder to all of us, to those of us who enjoy good health and are reasonably prosperous, that fullness of life is not necessarily found where there is fullness of physical health or absence of pain or poverty. And it is a reminder to those of you who are sick that in the life of the Son of God there was both agonizing pain and utter poverty, and that these had a place in the perfect life, perhaps a necessary place, and undoubtedly God wills for his own good reasons that they should have a place in your life. I heard a lovely story just the other day about a young Indian boy who lived in a little village on the edge of the desert. His family was very poor. Then one night he had this wonderful dream. An old man would come out of the desert in the morning and would be carrying a great black pearl of immense value. As soon as he woke, he hurried to the edge of the village, and there he saw an old man approaching, tired and weary after a long journey through the sands. The young man went up to him and blurted out, "Do you have a black pearl?" The old man gazed at him for a while, and then he reached wearily into his tattered bag and brought out what looked like a black stone, muddy and dirty. "How much do you want for it?" the boy asked. The old man shook his head. "If you want it, you can have it," he said, and he trudged on, penniless and weary, into the village. The young man took the pearl home, shut it up until it gleamed and glistened, an immense pearl worth thousands of pounds. He carried it around with him all day, thinking how lucky he had been. But that night, as he lay awake and thought for a long time about the strange happening, and early next morning he sought out the old man again. "Here," he said, "I have brought back your pearl. I am looking for one of even a greater price. I want to have the kind of generosity that made it possible for you to give away that treasure to me." And does not the gospel itself remind us that to follow Christ in his generous giving is a pearl of greater price, and that we must be ready to give away everything we have to attain it, that we must first lose our life in order to find it. God wishes to give us just one thing and one thing only, his own life, his own kind of loving, his own utter generosity. And of course the trouble is that most of us have our own false expectations of what he should be giving us, and first of all we have to be weaned away from these. We have to begin to see life in a different way. We have to become humble enough, small enough, simple enough, childlike enough to receive God's giving of himself. And the young man of the story needed to experience the utter generosity of the older man from the desert before he began to see life in a different way, before he could be freed from his own greed. And in the same way, I suggest that the rich of this world need the poor. They need to love them, need to be close to them. That is what can lift them out of their own greed, out of their own fear of poverty, and lead them to share, as the poor of this world alone know how to share. And in the same way, us who, thank God, are healthy, we need those who are sick. Yes, they need us too. They need us to visit them. They need to know they are needed as much as ever, that they are loved as much as ever. But we need you too out there in your sick bed, perhaps even more, to lift us out of our selfishness and out of our fear of sickness and old age. I came across an epitaph on the priest's grave which best expresses what I'm trying to say. He was a priest who was physically deformed all his life. And this is what the verse on his grave said: "Beneath this yew, the shadow of a shade, a little humble singing priest is laid. He loved his life, of death was not afraid, and loved his Maker, though so strangely made." And I think of that little humped-backed priest going through life and bringing joy and hope to many, precisely because he made light of his infirmity, even though we know he must have carried such a pain in his heart beneath the smiles and beneath the song. And I think this is the great vocation of the sick or the lonely, to be called, as the Holy Father said in Knock, to love with a special intensity. Despite their pain, to cling to God, despite your fears and loneliness, to manage a smile through the tears, and to shame us with your faith, and to call us out of our small self-centered ways to love and believe and hope with a new intensity too. You may at times cry out with Jesus from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" But it is a great prayer when, despite the darkness, you cling to him and he remains your God, the God into whose hands, like Jesus, you commend your sufferings and your lives. May the sick always know the power of God in their human weakness, and may we who care for them, who love them, who visit them, catch a greater faith and patience and love in our own lives. And now, together with all of you, particularly those in bed, at home or in hospital, we express the common faith that sustains us all